I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime, and this is Currents.
It's Respect Life Month, and just a couple of weeks before the election, we'll look at how the two are connected.
At times we have to hold one another's hands up in prayer, knowing that the battle will be ours.
And this local Catholic landmark was not always Catholic. The surprising story of how a whole community converted.
If you want to move from one family of faith to another, it's because of conscience.
Plus, it's a revival in Sunset Park. We'll take you to it.
I got involved at a very young age, at the age of 12, in my parish.
Well, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, as this year's Respect Life Month heads into the home stretch, so too do the races for political office. Those all over the headlines. And even in a year when the economy is the primary focus, life issues are also playing a part.
Indeed, this past weekend in Forest Hills, Queens, the Diocese of Brooklyn sponsored an interfaith discussion of how politics and life intersect.
In this country, every decision that's made, the starting point is what kind of a universe do we live in? Man-centered or God-centered?
We need to change our laws. But in order to do that, we must be able to elect those candidates for public office who are firmly committed to a pro-life agenda. And it's difficult.
The church, Catholic Church, I think especially, and probably other Christian churches, have been afraid to get involved in politics. And I'm glad to see that they had this event bringing politicians and church leaders together.
Religion and politics make very strange bedfellows, even though we believe very strongly in the right-hand kingdom and the left-hand kingdom, the kingdom of the church as well as the kingdom of good government and such things. We know that our government is not divinely instituted and that is run by humans and it's by popular vote. So even though something may be legal, it doesn't necessarily make it ethical, moral, or religiously in line with what we believe.
God has given us a standard to live by. This isn't a matter of personal opinion. We're not doing this because we feel that this is, our way and we should push you to follow and obey our way. No, but this is what God said. He have declared that all life belongs to him. He haven't given us the freedom to do with life what we choose. It's just not a freedom that God has given us.
Catholic politicians need to be reminded constantly from the laity and from the clergy how important the life issues and other issues are, not only to Catholics, but to people as a whole and to society as a whole. Most of the Catholic positions regarding life or marriage or traditional values are keeping into perspective the effect or the benefit for the common good, which applies to all people, not just Catholics, but people from every religion.
It is time to become more involved. It is time for the church, I believe, to become more involved in government every day. Because if we don't stop it now, we will never get it back.
Politically, what you can do within the church, and maybe within this parish, we have run baby showers for pregnant women and girls, and that was very helpful. And maybe expand a little bit more in that area where, girls don't feel, abandoned, and that there is this support system within their own church that will help them get through a pregnancy.
To win back for you and for the unborn the rights that you have given us.
Pro-life advocates have been working and praying for a very long time. One can get weary, as Moses did in the first reading at Mass today. They had to bring rocks over for him to sit down for a moment. Aaron and Hur had to hold his hands up so that his prayer would continue and the battle would go in favor of Israel. We need to support one another and encourage one another. At times we have to hold one another's hands up in prayer, knowing that the battle will be ours.
Well, some food for thought there heading into Election Day, which, by the way, is just 2 weeks from today.
Hard to believe. Stay tuned. There's much more current straight ahead. When we return, we'll have the day's headlines, including a new report indicates the tough economy has Americans in a less giving mood.
Well, Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime. Coming up later, young people come together in Brooklyn to praise the sun. We'll take you there.
But first, let's have a look at the day's headlines. Well, as the economy continues to putter along, charitable donations are taking a big hit. The Chronicle of Philanthropy reports donations to the nation's biggest charities dropped 11% last year. That's the steepest decline in the 20 years since the publication began keeping track. The report says nonprofits do not expect to do much better by the time 2010 comes to a close. Well, the tough economy is also having a negative impact on churches. Exhibit A, California megachurch The Crystal Cathedral, founded by Pastor Robert Schuller, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy Monday. The ministry owes vendors $7.5 million and is about $55 million in debt. Pastors say they've seen a huge decline from the recession, and they've dealt with some businesses that could not afford to be flexible.
This past April, we got together with the vendors and they agreed to a moratorium where we would work with them on figuring out to do a repayment plan, because we don't have $7.5 million in the bank to give them.
Right.
And we want to pay our vendors back.
Absolutely.
And most of the creditors were wonderful and wanted to work with us. There were a few who didn't want to play ball.
We receive very few critical emails and letters from our people. They're very, very grateful for this ministry, and they just keep saying, we love you, our lives depend on you. They are giving sacrificially. We hear that when we talk to them.
Several vendors filed lawsuits against the church. Crystal Cathedral says it will continue to hold weekly services, keep its schools open, and broadcast its famous Hour of Power TV show. Well, in Illinois, an appeals court upheld a state law that calls for a moment of silence in public schools. The 7th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled the law does not promote or prevent religious expression and is constitutional. The ruling overturns a lower court decision that struck down the moment of silence as a violation of the separation of church and state. A student and her father sued the state by saying the law violated the Constitution by injecting religion into public schools. Well, meantime, there is another courtroom battle over religion, this time in Tennessee. Attorneys for the Federal Justice Department filed a legal brief Monday in the fight over the construction of a mosque there near Nashville. Opponents of the mosque say Rutherford County officials did not determine whether the First Amendment protects the Islamic Center of Murfreesboro. Nashville-based U.S. Attorney Jerry Martin says the implication that Islam is not a recognized religion in this country is, quote, wrong and is not supported by any authority whatsoever.
In Poland, Catholic bishops are speaking out publicly against in vitro fertilization. IVF is a hot topic there because Poland does not have any laws regulating the procedure, and the parliament is expected to debate several competing bills on the issue. In a letter to lawmakers, the country's Catholic bishops called IVF the younger sister of eugenics. They also argued that to give birth to one child using the procedure, many other humans have to die. A Polish government spokesperson called the bishop's comments astonishing and suggested the church should stay out of politics. Elsewhere in Europe, there's controversy over religious education. Northern Ireland's First Minister Peter Robinson said this week that the government should not fund Catholic schools. He called the system a benign form of apartheid because it separates Protestants and Catholics during their formative years. Catholic bishops in Northern Ireland are speaking out against Robinson's comments. One bishop said Catholic schools should continue to receive government funding because parents have a fundamental right to send their children to religious schools. And finally, you know his paintings, Starry Night, The Cafe Terrace, and his famous self-portraits. But do you know anything about Vincent van Gogh's faith? Well, as we hear from Rome Report, some of his most famous works are on display now in Rome, and the exhibit gives us a glimpse into Van Gogh's religion.
Italy's capital is currently hosting an exhibit featuring 73 works by Dutch painter and one of the world's most famous Impressionists, Vincent van Gogh. Museums like the Louvre in Paris, New York's MoMA, or London's Tate Gallery have donated their prized Van Gogh paintings to illustrate who the artist really was.
He wasn't crazy, unless when painting, because when he worked, he was extremely cold. He was extremely cultured and exceptional, especially from the artistic point of view.
Oddly enough, this exhibit reveals one of the least known aspects of the artist, his religious background. Van Gogh's father was a Protestant minister, and Vincent had a Christian upbringing. That's why early in his career he painted some landscapes with churches.
When Van Gogh became an artist, the church became a symbol of eternal life, of the stability of human values. And in this case, for example, we see the old church tower of Nünen, which was no longer in service at the time.
The exhibition captures the artist's affinity for rural and urban landscapes. His early works sketch the lives of peasants in pencil and are always depicted in dark colors.
Van Gogh at that time wanted to paint with dark colors, as he felt that a peasant who was working with the earth should be painted with the colors of the earth.
This exhibit examines for the first time Van Gogh's relationship with the countryside, like timeless rural landscapes that never change, just like the rhythm of stations that regulate jobs for farmers. The city remains the modern world.
But this view of the countryside and the city has changed since Van Gogh arrived in Paris in 1886. There he met Impressionist contemporaries like Paul Gauguin, Paul Signac, and Jean-François Millet. His style changed and his paintings were filled with splashes of color. In addition, he painted 27 portraits like this oil painting made in 1887, and portraits such as Madame Roulin with her daughter. The exhibition has brought together for the first time some of the artist's most famous works and runs until January 30th.
Some beautiful art there. I've always loved Van Gogh.
Yeah, me too. I have a nice big sunflowers in my apartment, and yeah, it's just always bright and cheery every day when I look at it. It's great.
All right, well, stay tuned. There's more Currents coming up.
Just ahead, from Anglican to Catholic, a look at a community that converted more than 100 years ago.
The Franciscan sense of poverty and the Franciscan sense of rebuild my church fits so much with all of Christians being reunited.
Welcome back. Well, it was news that one observer called an earthquake. Last week, for the first time, a Church of England bishop in London announced that he intended to become a Catholic. Bishop John Broadhurst will be joining the church through the special structure, or ordinariate, set up by Pope Benedict earlier this year. And he'll have some company as well. Reports today indicate 3 other bishops are planning to join him. Also, the day after Bishop Broadhurst's announcement, a small Anglican parish in southeastern England, St. Peter's, announced that all of its members would be joining with the Catholic Church as well. Now, while this news is dramatic, it certainly is, but it's not unprecedented, as our Natalia Ortiz reports. Natalia?
Though the events in the Church of England may seem to have little impact on U.S. Catholics, there's a place right here in New York where the relationship between the churches brought about change that made history. Atop a hill in Putnam County, New York, sits an estate called Graymoor. It's now home to a Catholic order, but one that began more than a century ago as part of another faith.
The story of Graymoor starts around 1898, and when an Episcopal priest by the name of Paul Watson and an Episcopal sister by the name of Lorena Mary White decided that they wanted to found a religious order within the Episcopal Church.
And Father Paul began to see that the Franciscan sense of poverty and the Franciscan sense of rebuild my church, as he was asked, fits so much with his understanding and hers of rebuilding the church in the sense of all of Christians being reunited.
So Father Watson and Sister Lorena together established the Franciscan Friars and Sisters of the Atonement, making Graymoor its international headquarters. Though their society was based on unity, they often felt like they didn't really belong.
In that, Father Paul and Mother Lorena were part of what was called an Anglo-Catholic wing of the Episcopal Church. They believed, for instance, in the primacy of the Pope, which the Episcopal Church at that time did not accept. But they also believed in the validity of Anglican orders, which the Catholic Church didn't accept.
The founders were conflicted and struggled greatly, so they began to discern between the two faiths.
If you want to move from one family of faith to another, I think you have to, it's because of conscience. And, you know, and like conscience has been defined as that spark of the divine that's in everybody.
That spark led the founders, after years of careful contemplation, to become Roman Catholic.
And so in 1909, October 30th, they had petitioned Rome. Pius X was the Pope at the time. Pius X, now St. Pius X, said that yes, the community could come in as a group.
It was in this chapel in October 1909 that Father Watson, Sister Lorena, and 15 others were received into the Roman Catholic Church. The event marked the first time a group of people became Roman Catholic collectively since the Reformation. On that day, Graymoor became the site of a historical moment in Catholicism, and thereafter the Religious Society's mission evolved.
You know, Christian Unity has grown from being concerned for the unity of Christians to what's called, which is technically what ecumenism is, to what's called the wider ecumenism or interreligious dialogue.
Dialogue that has ranged over a wide array of issues, including the ordination of women, married priests, and church hierarchy. But for all their differences and disagreements on these and other topics, it's the similarities between the Anglican Catholic churches which tie the two so closely together.
Incredible agreement on the Eucharist, that we do believe it is the real presence.
As for what they disagree on,
this whole business that Jesus prayed for, Christian unity, it's his idea, okay? And guess what? It'll probably be done when he wants it and how he wants it.
Till then, the Franciscan Friars and Sisters of the Atonement say they will continue to pray. The transition to Catholicism at Graymoor has long smoothed over. Many hope Anglicans currently contemplating a move will experience results just as successful.
All right, well, it's something that obviously they didn't do lightly. I mean, you heard about all the discernment that you talked about there, that the priest talked about as well, and the sister, that it's a long process. And I think probably as much as history repeats itself, the people who we talked about before the story who are doing this now don't take it lightly either. I mean, they're changing their affiliation to another church altogether, so it can't be an easy decision.
It was a struggle, I think, for many years. They tried to fit in and realized that they had to just either make a move or, you know, stay where they were or move over, but they didn't want to be in that in-between stage, I guess.
And that was a nice reminder that he had it. He's like, this is Jesus's idea. This isn't original. You know, he wanted Christian unity, so this is not a new concept.
It's also important to mention that the Franciscan Friars and Sisters of the Atonement, this mission of unity that they still espouse to, has evolved not just among Christians. They don't want unity, they want unity among everyone. And so ecumenical interfaith, and they also have a lot of different ministries going on with rehabilitation centers, also to bring everyone, unite everyone, and help everyone out. So that's important to mention.
There you go. Natalia, thanks.
No, thank you.
And thank you, and stay with us. We'll be right back.
When we return, dancing, drama, music, and mass as young people come together to praise the sun. Well, finally tonight, if you found yourself outside last Saturday, you really had to hold on to your hat. I mean, it felt like March instead of October. It was nice and windy out there, yes. But that did not keep some enthusiastic young people from gathering in Brooklyn's Sunset Park to offer prayers and praise.
It was a breath of fresh air for all of them, quite literally. New Creation Ministry and the Jornada movement together celebrated their faith as New York, for one day at least, became the Windy City.
We're here in Sunset Park in Brooklyn, and for the event called Praising the Sun, S-O-N. We're gonna have preachings, music ministries, different music ministries from Brooklyn and Queens. We have praise dancers called the Warriors of Christ, and most importantly, we're gonna have an outdoor mass. This community has been affected by a lot of violence recently, with gang violence, and the drug use over here is big, and the kids really don't have many options that they are aware of, so that they go to those things. So we just want to let them know there's youth groups over here. There's a lot of different opportunities to do something good, and there's a lot of hope out there. The Jornada movement is a movement over here in Brooklyn and Queens, but we also stretch out to Manhattan, the Bronx, and we're a youth and young adult movement that concentrates on working with inner city youth, Hispanic youth. got involved at a very young age, at the age of 12, in my parish. They reached out to me. I came from a very small family, and I was searching for more family.
When I was 12 years old, I started to sing and play the bass for Jesus, and I've been with this all my life. I'm 27 now. I would not trade it for the world. Today's event is wonderful. It's been blessed. There's so many young people here, and it's wonderful to just see the number of young, adults and youth that have come to worship Christ. And we've come together to just lift his name on high, and I'm very excited to be here.
It's very nice. The music's nice. The weather's kind of bad. I mean, it's very windy, but it's all right. It is hard to be a teenager, trying to balance out school and everything else, your social life. I mean, it's not easy, but, the only thing you can do is try. I'm looking forward to becoming a jornadista one day.
The Jornada movement, we've been around since the late 60s. We have thousands of jornadistas all over. And this is the new generation of the youth, but you'll find jornadistas, we always find jornadistas wherever we go.
That's what I love so much about the diocese is there's something for everyone.
Yeah,
so,
seriously.
You can really sort of pick what's going to work for you, and there are so many options for young people in terms of, finding their faith and renewing their faith, and in this case, doing it very charismatically, as you could see.
Right, yeah, the young, the old, the in-between, no matter your ethnic background, there is really, truly something for everybody here. In Brooklyn and Queens, and I'll tell you, that was a windy experience. I'm surprised we didn't have teenagers flying away and all that, but at least they were there and in good numbers too. As you said, they were very impressed with all of the kids that did show up.
Indeed, it's always nice to see the attendance there. Well, that is it for our show for tonight. Coming up tomorrow, we'll bring you highlights from the historic convocation of deacons and priests out in Douglaston, featuring Boston's Cardinal Sean O'Malley.
But in the meantime, remember, we're always online over at currentsny.net. And you can follow us on Facebook and on Twitter as well. Until next time, I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great night.